Hey guys, middle of the night here in Australia, and I decided to get up to watch the inauguration. I wouldn't miss it for the world, and I can't help but, as I watch it, to miss my father so much with this. As you may know, my dad passed away nearly 4 years ago in his early 90s, and I'm glad in many ways that he passed away when he did, because he missed out on seeing what's happened in the States in the last 4 years, let alone in the last 4 weeks. But also, he's missed out on COVID. And Peru, of course, is doing it really tough, but let alone the States. But this would have been really hard for him anyway, because you see, my dad loved two countries almost as much as he loved his Peru. The first is he loved France, and the second is he loved the U.S. He admired both immensely. In the case of the U.S., the number of times he said the world owes so much to the U.S. post WW2, as they played an integral part in the rebuilding of the world following a world war. And yes, there were politics involved between the Soviets, of course, and the U.S., but anyway, he had a huge admiration for the U.S., huge. And seeing what's transpired in the last 4 years would have broken his heart, really would have broken his heart. Anyway, so as part of my own therapy, dare I say, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And those of you who knew my parents in the 70s and 80s in Washington no doubt know that every Sunday my father had an open invitation to anyone within the international community of Washington, which was rather large, for Sunday lunchtime. And, my family, we never really knew how many would come. Sometimes it was as small as just us. Other times there was about 20 people or maybe even more around the dinner table during lunch. And my father had three passions. The first was chess. The second was music. And the third was politics. And for him, politics, what made it so interesting for him wasn't necessarily the ideological end of it, but the science and political science is what really fascinated him. And in the, nearly 50 years that he was involved in developmental law and banking and what have you, he never joined a political party, because he said, as an independent, I will vote for the candidate and the party who is talking most logically about what I think the country needs and what I can align myself with. So that served him really well as a Peruvian, of course, during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when all those coups and what have you. But seeing what's happening now in the States and the insurrectionist movements in the capital as the cherry on the top of what's transpired over the last 4 years really would have shaken him. And I have no doubt whatsoever that not only would my father have watched the inauguration, but the topic of conversation around our Sunday lunch table would have been dominated by politics. And so what I want to do for my own therapy is I want to pretend I'm at the dinner table on a Sunday afternoon at Casa Prugue in Bethesda. As you can see, there it is. And I'm going to pretend that's my dad. Hola, papa. So I'm going to be talking to a candle, but my imagination will pretend it's him. I suspect my dad would ask me, what are my thoughts about Trump? And he wouldn't want me to, or anyone for that matter, to have an ill-conceived or ill-thought debate and discussion. He was a lover of Socratic debate. And in Socratic debate, there's no such thing as, well, where were you when Obama did this? Or where were you when Clintons did that? That's not Socratic debate. That's just childish response lacking any consideration, thought, or intellect. And my father was really into thought and intellect. Anyway, so he would probably say, what's your thought on this? So I have to give him an answer that is a little bit more thorough. So bear with me. Well, Dad, it would be easy to say that Trump started a cult, if you like, a movement. And this movement may have had its seeds in the Tea Party movement, and really Trump cultivated that and grew it to what it is now, for his benefit. The Republican Party is now, in my opinion, made up of three sects. The most obvious one is the sect is our traditional conservative economic management. Low debt, low taxes, small government. That element is still alive and well. The Reagan's definition of that is still alive and well within the Republican Party. The other sect is evangelical religious, whereby it's really the sole focus is Roe v. Wade and the overturn of Roe v. Wade, should I say. And the third one, which is probably a larger one now, relative to when you were alive, Dad, is I would call nationalists or isolationists. And the nationalists / isolationists are tired of the U.S. and the role it plays for global stability, a role that it has played very proudly post-WW2. Whether, to help through the Marshall Plan of rebuilding of Europe, to the formation of the World Bank, or what have you. And initially it rebuilt Europe, then it helped to rebuild Latin America, and then it helped to rebuild, Asia, and then, of course, with the demise of the Berlin Wall, the rest of the world. The rise of the global middle class that didn't exist in many third world countries is now very evident. And although the U.S. may not be responsible for all of that, its fingerprint is clearly on there. And the isolationist is tired of the UN, the isolationist is tired of the World Health, the isolationist is tired of forking out all that money because they see it as lost money. Never mind that, of course, the U.S. benefits from it economically, but that's neither here nor there. The isolationists is also, in my opinion, probably the most dangerous because within the isolationists is the insurrectionists. The white group that want to reclaim their influence and power. At least I think so. And what concerned me was that relative to 2016 and 2020 election, Trump got another 5 million votes. Now, given that the Never Trumpers and the Lincoln Project Republicans, if you like, have vowed not to vote for him, and Republicans as a group are usually very loyal voters, the question is where do these where these 5 million these additional 5 million votes come from, but where do these additional 10 million votes come from when you include the exclusion of the Never Trumpers and the Lincoln Project Republicans? And my belief is that over the 4 years, Trump has given a platform to the insurrectionists based on race, based on religion. And these white working class Americans who feel forgotten by their government want to reclaim it back. And the Republicans foolishly didn't see that this group was like a militia. It was Trump's militia, and Trump knew it. And Steve Bannon and Steve Miller and Giuliani and knew it. So yeah, I think the fact that we now have additional 10 million American voters who in previous elections didn't vote because their views were so far out they didn't bother is a concern. His next question would then probably be, where do you see Trumpism over the next 5 years? And I said, I don't know about the number of times, but if you look back in history, populists, is the rise of populism, it reminds me of Greek mythology, in as much that they fly high and fly high and fly high, but eventually they get so close to the sun that the wax wings melt and they crash down to earth. And history is littered with that, whether it's the 1940s in Germany, Japan, and Spain, or whether it's, if you want to go further back, Dad, to France and the French Revolution, the rise of populists there, where eventually the populists, are the ones who start the fight, bring the masses to them, but then the masses turn on the persons who started the fight. So I think, I don't know when, I don't know how, but eventually this is going to happen. And I think, much like we saw McCarthy run out of town, I think the Trump name will be run out of town maybe in 5 years, maybe in 2 years, who knows. But I think it will be its own worst enemy. And his next question would be, okay, Rob, so I can see you're very emotional. Why? What's hurt you the most? Why are you so emotional about it? And I said, Dad, probably because of how you raised me. The last 4 years, mostly driven by, again, the isolationist segment within the Trump movement, has turned the country and the government policies away from not just the rest of the world, but away from those who are in need. And what's also sad about that is maybe that's the economic branch of the Republican movement saying, well, if you're going to cut taxes for the top 1%, you're going to have to cut expenses because revenue is not going to go up because trickle-down economics fails miserably. So you're going to have to cut expenses. So you're going to cut expenses to the World Health, the UN, or whatever, but eventually also to Social Security, also to education, also to infrastructure, also to Veterans Affairs, what have you. And a lot of people are going to die as a result of these cuts. But I think what's saddened me the most is how this has presented itself with COVID, where an exact science, e.g. biology, is now considered inexact, and an inexact science, e.g. political science, is considered exact. Wow. And that has been the main reason why the U.S. is so impacted by COVID vis-a-vis other countries. Dad, did you know that if you were to grab and look at all the Americans to date who have had COVID, there's about 25 million. If it is 25 million, that would make it, and you were to grab all these 25 millions and put them on an island, that would be the 56th largest country in the world. there's 400,000 deaths. And there's been a lot of flags around everywhere to sort of show this, right? And the Capitol. But here's another way of putting it. If you assume an average height of 5'6" or 170 centimeters, and you put everyone laying down, head to toe, head to toe, head to toe, head to toe. In other words, someone's toes are touching another cadaver's head, and then that cadaver's toes are touching another cadaver's head, and lay them down vertically on a highway. And if you were to get in your car and drive at the speed limit of 65 miles an hour, or what's that, about 110 kilometers an hour, it would take you 6.5 hours to drive before you would no longer see dead bodies by the side of the road. 6.5 hours. And I think that, we've gone COVID fatigue, and we lose sight of, it's like when you're up 30,000 feet above, in the plane, and you look down, it doesn't really look like you're above the earth. Sure, you see the clouds and all that, but it's a foreign look. It only becomes more familiar when the plane gets down to like 10,000 feet, right? And you start seeing houses and you start seeing trees. But when you're really way up high, even though it's still the same earth, you've lost that sort of affinity of what you know as earth. And I think the same thing is true with COVID. And that, to me, breaks my heart, Dad. And I know, you know what? And I know I'm speaking to your spirit, but I think it would break your heart as well. Anyway, that would be the conversation. So now I'm going to go back and watch the inauguration. I'm going to be assuming that my father is sitting next to me, and he would be overjoyed because he would see empathy and sanity and listening to a more thoughtful discourse and discussion rather than a blame game and cheap politics. And so I'm going to be sitting in the sofa next to my dad watching the inauguration, as I hope you are as well in this very momentous moment. So thank you very much. Please stay safe, and fuck Trump. Love you all. Take care. Bye.